reported a remotely operated vehicle found a debris field in the search area near the Titanic. That briefing underway. Let's go ahead and listen.
This morning, an ROV, or remote operated vehicle, from the vessel Horizon Arctic discovered the tail cone of the Titan submersible approximately 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic on the seafloor. The ROV subsequently found additional debris. In consultation with experts from within the Unified Command, the debris is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. Upon this determination, we immediately notified the families. On behalf of the United States Coast Guard and the entire Unified Command, I offer my deepest condolences to the families. I can only imagine what this has been like for them, and I hope that this discovery provides some solace during this difficult time. Additionally, we've been in close contact with the British and French consuls general to ensure that they are fully apprised and that their concerns are being addressed. The outpouring of support in this highly complex search operation has been robust and immensely appreciated. We are grateful for the rapid mobilization of experts on the undersea search and rescue, and we thank all of the agencies and personnel for their role in the response. We're also incredibly grateful for the full spectrum of international assistance that's been provided. The ROVs will remain on scene and continue to gather information. Again, our most heartfelt condolences go out to the loved ones of the crew. We'll now take questions.
John, what other debris have you found? John, what other debris have you found?
Can you talk about the delay in reporting the vessel missing and what impact that had on the recovery?
This was a incredibly complex case, and we're still working to develop the details for the timeline involved with this casualty and the response. And so we'll provide that information.
James Matthews from Sky News. John, what other debris have you found? And have you found any trace of those who were on it?
So this is an incredibly complex operating environment on the seafloor, over 2 miles beneath the surface. And so the remote operating vehicle has been searching, and it is highly capable. And we've been able to classify parts of the pressure chamber for the Titan submersible. Let me refer to one of my undersea experts here, Mr. Paul Hankin, to talk about the nature of some of the debris.
Thank you, Admiral. So essentially, we found 5 different major pieces of debris that told us that it was the remains of the Titan. The initial thing we found was the nose cone, which was outside of the pressure hull. We then found a large debris field. Within that large debris field, we found the front end bell of the pressure hull. That was the first indication that there was a catastrophic event. Shortly thereafter, we found a second smaller debris field. Within that debris field, we found the other end of the pressure hull, the aft end bell, which was basically comprised of the totality of that pressure vessel. We continue to map the debris field. And as the Admiral said, we will do the best we can to fully map out what's down there.
Can I ask you, Admiral, can I ask you, thank you very much. It's a very difficult question to ask, but it will be an important one for the families, of course. What are the prospects of recovering the bodies of the missing crew?
So the questions was related. I'm restating the question from the standpoint of sometimes it's hard to hear the question here. What are the prospects for recovering crew members? And so this is a incredibly unforgiving environment down there on the seafloor. And the debris is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel. And so we'll continue to work and continue to search the area down there, but I don't have an answer for prospects at this time.
Admiral Costello at NBC News. Is there any suggestion? Sorry, any suggestion at all that the sub itself collided with the wreckage of Titanic, or that instead it might have imploded above the wreckage and then rained down nearby?
So the question was, is there any question as to whether or not the sub collided with the Titanic or whether it imploded above and debris field created from that? So the location of the Titan submersible was in an area that was approximately 1,600 feet from the wreck of the Titanic. I have an expert here that is familiar with that area and can talk about the debris field and what the debris field indicates in terms of where the casualty may have occurred.
Rear Admiral, really quickly, can you tell me when that massive fleet will be called back?
Hang on a second. The expert voice is coming up to answer the question.
Thank you, Admiral. So the question is, where does the wreck lie in relation to the Titanic? I didn't hear the Admiral's answer. I think 1,600 feet. Was that correct, Admiral?
Yep, you got it.
So that's off the bow of Titanic. It's in an area where there is not any debris of Titanic. It is a smooth bottom. To my knowledge and anything I've seen, there's no Titanic wreckage in that area. And again, 200 plus meters from the bow, and consistent with the location of last communication for an implosion in the water column. And the size of the debris field is consistent with that implosion in the water column.
Well, if I can ask a question, in terms of the timing here, you say that this was a catastrophic implosion. And I know it's early on, but is it your estimation that this happened right at the moment when they lost contact, an hour and 45 minutes after their descent?
So the question was about the timing of the catastrophic implosion. Right now, it is too early to tell with that. We know that as we've been prosecuting this search over the course of the last 72 hours and beyond, that we've had sonar buoys in the water nearly continuously and have not detected any catastrophic events when those sonar buoys have been in the water. So,
Can you describe what happens from here, sir, in the next days and weeks?
The question was, what happens from here? What's the next phase? And so right now, again, our thoughts are with the families and making sure that they have an understanding as best as we can provide of what happened and begin to find some closure. In terms of the large process, we're going to continue to investigate the site of the debris field. And then I know that there's also a lot of questions about how, why, and when did this happen. And so, those are questions that we will collect as much information as we can on now. While the governments are meeting and discussing, what an investigation of this nature of a casualty might look like. This is something that happened. I'll just remind everybody. This is something that happened in a remote portion of the ocean with people from several different countries around the world. And so it is a complex case to work through, but I'm confident that those questions will begin to get answered.
From the UK, is there any suggestion that time factors, speed, anything could have prevented this or saved 5 people on board, or is this quite simply a catastrophic accident?
The question was there any suggestion that time factors may have played a role or a consideration in the casualty here? And so the debris field is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel. Again, while we were prosecuting the search, we had listening devices in the water throughout and did not hear any signs of catastrophic failure from those. And so we're going to continue to investigate, or we're going to continue to document the information there and understand, based on all the information we have, the timeline.
What does this mean for the resources required for the investigation? Which ships will be pulling out and coming in?
So the question was, what are the resources required for the investigation, and which ships will be pulling out and staying in? And so it's too early for me to talk about an investigation. That's a decision that's going to be taken outside of the search and efforts that I was leading. But we do have a number of vessels. We have 9 vessels on the scene right now. We had medical personnel on scene. We had other technicians on scene. And so we will begin to demobilize personnel and vessels from the scene over the course of the next 24 hours. But we're going to continue remote operations on the seafloor. And I don't have a timeline for when we would intend to stop remote operations on the seafloor at this point.
As a result of this, do you think there should be changes in the way these are safety rated or inspected so that this won't happen again?
Yeah, the question was essentially about do you think that there should be changes in safety ratings or inspection for these standards? I know that there's a lot of questions about why, how, when this happened, and the members of the Unified Command, have those questions too, as professionals and experts that work in this environment. And this is an incredibly difficult and dangerous environment to work in out there. But those questions about the regulations that apply and the standards, that's going to be, I'm sure, focus of future review. Right now, we're focused on documenting the scene and continuing the subfloor.
We don't know the timing here, but there was the banging noises yesterday that redirected and redeployed the ROVs to this area. Is there anything conclusive in those noises, and did that redirection and then finding this debris field today all help?
So throughout the search efforts, we reacted to the information that we had available to us, and while we continued to send it off for deeper analysis. Again, really complex operating environment for us to work in. Let me check with the experts, but there doesn't appear to be any connection between the noises and the location on the seafloor. Again, this was a catastrophic implosion of the vessel, which would have generated a significant broadband sound down there that the sonar buoys would have picked up.
This will be the last question.
Admiral, can I just ask you about your comment regarding the families?
The drop into the ocean today arrived early this morning. It seems that swiftly was able to find the refill. We talked about the speed of that. And also, were all of the assets involved moved as swiftly as possible to the area? Was any help turned away, as some lawmakers have criticized the government?
This was a incredibly complex operation, and we were able to mobilize an immense amount of gear to the site in just a really remarkable amount of time, given the fact that we started without any sort of vessel response plan for this or any sort of pre-stage resources. And so the equipment that was brought on site this morning that we were using was a pelagic ROV capable of operating at 6,000 meters, cameras, sonar, other articulating arms and resources on it. And it, we had to transport it here through C-17 aircraft. This is 2 aircraft that it took to get this up here. And so we've really had the right gear on site and worked as swiftly as possible to bring all of the capabilities that we had to bear to this search and rescue effort. And it was just a huge international and interagency effort to make this happen. So I'm really grateful for all of the responders that came out to support this and really search for the vessel. It is a difficult day for all of us, and it's especially difficult for the families, and our thoughts are with the families today. But this was an immense support, and we had the right gear on the bottom to find it. So thank you.
Will you attempt to recover the bodies, can we ask you? The victims, will they be recovered?
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this afternoon.
All right, you've been watching a press conference right there with the Coast Guard, the Rear Admiral giving an update on the tragic news involving that Titanic submersible vehicle that has now been found in what they call the debris field near the Titanic. The update that they gave us is that it looked to be consistent with a catastrophic implosion. Officials saying that the area, the unforgiving environment on the ocean floor likely led to this, and that they could find the debris and pieces of that sub about 1,600 feet away from the bow of the Titanic. This is something that we've been fearing as we approached the morning hours when time essentially ran out for the 5 people on board that vehicle. About 90 plus hours worth of oxygen there, but now it appears it likely didn't matter. There was this catastrophic implosion that officials have been talking about. We're still waiting to get more details on all of that. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and bring in Gio Benitez, who's there in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Gio, you've been following this for days now. And frankly, behind the scenes, this was the concern that a lot of people have been talking about.
Yeah, a lot of people feared this, Whit, because when we looked at this and wondered, why can't we find this? With all the technology and everything that's out there and all of the crews, still they couldn't find this. That's what we worried about. What happened on Sunday? And now it appears we are being led to believe that there was some sort of implosion as it was being lowered down to the Titanic. An hour, 45 minutes in, that's when they lost contact, and that is the area, they said, in which it's consistent with that lowering. And of course, as you approach those deeper levels, you are talking about an incredible amount of pressure, an incredible amount of stress that is going up against this ship as it's going down. And we're talking about 110 times the pressure of what is here above the surface. And so it is just really unforgiving when you're talking about that. And I think back to the warnings from a former employee back in 2018, who in court documents was talking about this non-destructive test that he wanted the company to go through. And he wanted that because he said that the carbon fiber, as it reached those levels, deeper and deeper, dive after dive, that it would create bigger and bigger cracks and eventually potentially lead to something like this.
And that was part of this concern, Gio, that this was essentially an experimental vehicle. It was not certified by international bodies. So there was some concern over the materials that made it. But Gio, we're also hearing from the company, right? They're talking about the 5 people on board and the lives lost.
That's right. They did release this statement here, Whit, and it says, "We now believe that our CEO Stockton Rush, Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman Dawood, Hamish Harding, and P.H. Narjouleh have sadly been lost." And I got to tell you, P.H. Narjouleh, he is the foremost expert on the Titanic. They call him Mr. Titanic around the world. He is the person with the most experience down at the Titanic site and knew so much about it. So he would have been such an expert. And so when you look at him going down there in this vehicle, that says a lot. And we're looking at that. But P.H. Narjouleh, a legendary explorer here. And so the company, of course, is saying that these men were true explorers who shared a distinct spirit of adventure and a deep passion for exploring and protecting the world's oceans.
All right, Gio, thank you. Again, it was a remotely operated vehicle managed by the French that was able to discover this debris field, and it was first found about 1,600 feet off the bow of the Titanic. They found the nose cone outside of a pressure hull. Then they found a larger debris field, and the first indication that there was that catastrophic event, they also found a second smaller debris field. And officials said as soon as they were able to analyze that and understand what it was that they were seeing, they then notified the families of the 5 people on board. We do have a very special guest joining us to help us understand more about all of this. Bob Ballard, a renowned oceanographer and explorer, is joining us right now. Bob, thank you so much. We truly appreciate it. I understand, obviously you were part of the mission that discovered the Titanic, and you've been down there, I'm being told, on about 150 dives to the wreckage. Just want to get your take on the news that we're hearing breaking right now.
Well, I didn't make that many dives. I made the first 12 that were ever made on the Titanic, and then I went back with remotely operated vehicles last time in 2004. But yes, it's very tragic what happened. I know the people that passed away. I've known Stockton for 20 years, and I know this was his dream. So my heart goes out to he and his family and the families of all the people who lost loved ones. This tragic event more than likely took place on Sunday when they lost connection with the surface. More than likely, they, as they were experiencing difficulties, began to drop their weights and ascend to the surface. They never made it. So if you're on your way up and you're buoyant and you don't make it, it's a catastrophic implosion. And I don't think people can appreciate the amazing energy involved in the destructive process of an implosion. I've explored the Thresher and the Scorpion, which were 2 U.S. submarines. In the case of the Scorpion, ended up at a similar depth, and it just takes and literally shreds everything. So it's extremely powerful. And then that's what they'll be doing right now. They're now below the circulation system of the ocean in that area. So they'll do a systematic mapping. Those ROVs can remain. I have one just like it, the one over my shoulder. Hercules is on my ship. In fact, you can see in the image, I'm in my command center. My ship's at sea right now. Unfortunately, we were unable to help because we're in the Pacific Ocean, but it's a very similar technology. And the beauty of these remotely operated vehicles is they can stay down days and days and days. So they'll be mapping all through the night and into the next day until they believe they've done 100% systematic coverage of the wreck site. And then the analysis of that database will start to tell the larger story.
And Bob, since you are so familiar with the site of the wreckage and also these other submersible vehicles that go down and explore things like the Titanic, we've been reporting on for a few years now concerns over this specific vehicle, the carbon fiber titanium combination that essentially made up the shell of this, for lack of a better word. Did you have a sense initially when you first learned that the vehicle was lost that perhaps something catastrophic may have happened?
Well, you have to understand that we began taking vehicles into the deep sea with the historic dive of the Thresher, the Trieste in Challenger Deep in 1960. we've made thousands and thousands of dives with different vehicles, whether they're French, whether they're Russian, whether they're American. And we've never had, ever, in the history of these extreme deep diving programs, ever lost a vehicle. So this is a first. And so you naturally go to, how does this vehicle differ from the vehicles that we've been using for many years? And it did have a very experimental hull, and obviously that hull imploded.
And Bob, do you think, given what happened here, that there ought to be an end, or at least a temporary pause, to this type of tourism, to go see the Titanic wreckage while they sort out what happened?
Well, you know, again, as you know, I was opposed to taking anything from the Titanic, but I've never been opposed to people visiting, as long as they do it in a safe way. We've gone back. Jim Cameron mounted numerous expeditions there. Again, what's different about a submarine, for example, than an airplane? An airplane, gravity is your enemy. But if you have a deep submersible, buoyancy is your friend. All you have to do when you're in trouble is get light and you go home. And I'm sure they were attempting to get light and go home, but the hull itself imploded. So that's where you'll see all the energy focusing on any future regulations on safety. But again, I want to point out, this has never happened in our deep submergence world, beginning from when we first started in 1960.
And again, Bob,
safer, if you look at our history, it's safer to be in a submarine like Alvin, that I spent many years in, than driving on I-95.
Well, Bob Ballard, we certainly appreciate your insight and expertise in all of this. Again, we do remember 5 people on board, their families grieving, as searchers now try to recover the rest of that debris. Bob, thank you. And speaking of James Cameron, another person closely familiar with the Titanic is the director, James Cameron himself, along with his Oscar-winning movie. Mr. Cameron, I understand you've made a number of dives to the wreckage site, too. Just give us your sense on what you're feeling right now, looking at these images of the shipwreck that you studied so closely, and now hearing that another tragedy has been tied to the same area.
Well, I've been down there many times, and I know the wreck site very well, as does my friend Bob Ballard. I've made 33 dives. I actually calculated that I've spent more time on the ship than the captain did back in the day. And of course, you know, as a submersible designer myself, I designed and built a sub to go to the deepest place in the ocean, 3 times deeper than Titanic. So I understand the engineering problems associated with building this type of vehicle and all the safety protocols that you have to go through. And I think that what Bob said, because I was watching, is absolutely critical for people to really get the take-home message from this, from our effort here, is deep submergence diving is a mature art. From the early 60s, where there were, you know, a few accidents, nobody was killed in the deep submergence, until now, is more time than between Kitty Hawk and the flight of the first 747. So if we haven't improved over that period of time, and you know, we have improved drastically over that period of time, and the certification protocols that all other deep submergence vehicles, except this one, that carry passengers, especially paying passengers, all over the world in tropical waters, deep coral reefs, other wreck sites, and so on. The safety record is the gold standard, absolutely. Not only no fatalities, but no major incidents requiring all of these assets to converge to a site. Of course, that's the nightmare that we've all lived with, you know, since all of us entered this field of deep exploration. We live with it in the back of our minds. But because implosion, as Bob described it, such a violent event, is first and foremost in our minds. The pressure boundary, which is what they call the hull of the sub, that the people go inside, is obviously first and foremost in our minds as engineers. And we spend so much time and energy on that. And we use all the computerized tools available today, finite element analysis. We worked on our sphere for our deep vehicle that went to the Challenger Deep for over 3 years, just in the computer, before we even made the thing. And then, of course, we pressure tested it over and over and over, and so on. So, you know, this is a mature art, and many people in the community were very concerned about this sub, and a number of the top players in the deep submergence engineering community even wrote letters to the company saying that what they were doing was too experimental to carry passengers and that needed to be certified and so on. So I'm struck by the similarity of the Titanic disaster itself, where the captain was repeatedly warned about ice ahead of his ship, and yet he steamed at full speed into an ice field on a moonless night, and many people died as a result. And for a very similar tragedy where warnings went unheeded to take place at the same exact site, with all the diving that's going on all around the world, I think it's just astonishing. It's really quite surreal. And of course, P.H. Nargeolet, the French legendary submersible dive pilot, a friend of mine. You know, it's a very small community. I've known PH for 25 years. For him to have died tragically in this way is almost impossible for me to process.
It is certainly haunting to consider that comparison to the Titanic and what happened to the 5 people on board this submersible vehicle. James, I want to ask you, though, since you've been down on these dive missions before, we talked about the safety risks. We've reported on the fact that the people on board signed waivers. They knew that this was dangerous and that there weren't very many other vehicles that could come get them out if something goes wrong. How aware were you of those concerns and those risks before you went down? And is there anything that should be done when it comes to safety in the future?
Look, it's comparing apples and oranges here. I went with a very proven system when I dove at Titanic with the Russian submersibles. They used very, very well understood design methodologies, and they had an excellent operating record when I dove with them, and they continued to have an excellent operating record, flawless operating record throughout their entire career. I think they're now retired. But I always had great confidence. Now, having said that, I always had confidence in the sub. The Titanic wreck site is a very hostile place. It's a dangerous site to dive. If you think of a typical research dive, you go down and you're really just operating over a bottom. You may be looking for organisms. You may be looking at geology. Hydrothermal vent sites can be a bit dangerous as well. But Titanic, you've got, you know, this 8-story, 10-story high structure with overhanging metal structures. It's a twisted mess. You can get entangled. And entanglement was always a concern of ours, but we dove with a 2-sub system. We always felt confident that if one of the subs got ensnared, you'd still have communication, you'd still have life support, you'd still have power, you'd have another sub there that could help you manage the problem. We always felt that we were on pretty safe ground. This sub had no backup. It didn't have a lot of backup systems, from what I understand, and it was predicated on what I think of as a fundamentally flawed design principle, which is a carbon fiber hull, which when I first heard about a move toward composite hulls, and this was many years ago, even when I was designing my sub, there was another sub that was sort of in competition with us to get to the Challenger Deep that was operated by a guy named Chris Welsh for Richard Branson. And they had a composite hull, and I told those guys, I said, somebody's going to get killed in that sub or in a sub like it. And the DNA of the Ocean Gate sub was in that sub at the time. You know, 2 hemispherical end caps and a carbon fiber cylinder in the center. And I never believed in that, because the way it fails is it delaminates, because you have to have a hull, a pressure hull made out of a contiguous material like steel or like titanium, you know, which is the proven standard, or like acrylic. You know, you know, I have a small equity stake in I think one of the best submersible companies in the world, Triton Submersibles, and they use acrylic for their hulls. But once again, it's a contiguous material, so you can do computer modeling to see how it'll behave. But this OceanGate sub had sensors on the inside of the hull to give them a warning when it was starting to crack. And I think if that's your idea of safety, then you're doing it wrong. You don't, and they probably had warning that their hull was starting to delaminate and starting to crack. Because as Bob pointed out, it's our belief, we understand from inside the community, that they had dropped their ascent weights and they were coming up trying to manage an emergency.
And to your point, a warning only goes so far when you have the ability to get back to the surface, or there's a backup vehicle there to come help you out of a bad situation. James Cameron, thank you so much for your time. I would like to bring Bob Ballard back in while we still have him on the line here, because Bob, I understand the wreckage of the Titanic here, it's not going to last forever. What more can we learn, should we learn about that shipwreck, and what can we do as we continue to explore this space in the ocean?
Well, the Titanic's bow went deep in. The anchor you were just showing is almost touching the sediment, so it went far in. And what we've learned about the deep sea is as soon as you go in a couple of centimeters, it's anoxic. So when we were down, we could literally scrape away the mud and you see a brand new hull. So the Titanic's bow is literally being held together by the fact that it's deep into the mud. And we all have different views. I think the Titanic, the main hull and those main pieces will be there for a long, long time.
All right, Bob Ballard and James Cameron, once again, thank you so much. I do want to bring in Sam Sweeney, who's part of our transportation team here at ABC News. Sam, I know that you've been following this very closely. Just give us some final thoughts here on the next steps. Obviously, there's going to be an investigation. They're going to try to look into what caused this catastrophic implosion. But what happens here in the days to come as they try to recover the remaining debris?
Right, they are going to look at this on the ocean floor first. They're going to document it thoroughly using these professional cameras that will give us details that we may not be able to get once it's brought up to the surface, if they are able to do that. But everyone is going to be looking at the hull here. That's where all experts were concerned all week long when they first heard about this. We're talking about fatigue of this material. Imagine a balloon and you blow it up and then you deflate it, and you do that repetitively. Well, eventually the nylon is going to become weak and it's going to pop. And that's what a lot of experts were concerned with this hull and this submersible vehicle when it was being built all the way back to 2018.
Yeah, and the question was how many trips down below would it be able to withstand? And we understand it's been more than a dozen trips or so. Sam Sweeney, thank you so much. I just wanted to reiterate again, 5 people on board believed to be dead in this catastrophic implosion, and the company has put out this statement saying that these men were true explorers who shared a distinct spirit of adventure. And those are the photographs of the 5 people, including a 19-year-old who was there with his father. Our coverage will continue here on ABC News and ABC News Live, abcnews.com as well. And then I'll be right back here with the entire team for World News Tonight and a full wrap-up. For now, I'm Wade Johnson in New York. Have a great day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Keep kids busy. All you have to do is take some tiny toys, stick them in a container,